To any women listening who run their own businesses and started your own business, maybe because you wanted to be at home, present for your kids, your family, and wanted more time and freedom in your life, and actually you have just become in a place of hustling all the time, overworking, exhausted, doing, then this episode is for you. So I'm speaking to Renae Fieck. She is a mum of three, an occupational therapist, a breathwork facilitator, and a feminine leadership coach. She helps high-achieving women unlock the power of their cycles so they can achieve their wildest dreams by aligning with their feminine energy and strengths. Through her method, she helps women balance the demands of life, make bigger impact, and get bigger results without adding more stress or needing more time. So we go into the menstrual cycle and how we can utilize our feminine energy to be more magnetic, to actually grow our businesses and get more time and energy back. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Thank you for tuning in to the Calm Your Nervous System podcast, where you will learn to regulate your nervous system, not just calm it. I'm your host, Jenny Adams, and I'm a somatic coach who has recovered from debilitating ME and trauma. Alongside my guest experts, I'm here to share tips, stories, and debunk jargon, what is somatics anyway, about how you can regulate your nervous system so you don't have to live with chronic illness, burnout, or debilitating trauma for the rest of your life. A joyful life is possible. So, hi Renae, and welcome to the Calm Your Nervous System podcast. Thank you so much for coming on, especially from 8 hours away in San Diego. Is that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm really excited to pick your brains and get all into menstrual cycles and why this is so important. And this is something that I definitely bring into my work as well. Mm-hmm. So before we get stuck into what it is, what's brought you to this work?
Yeah.
How did you find this?
Well, out of sheer necessity, I think is a good way to put it. I am an occupational therapist, and probably about 10 years ago, I had just landed my dream job at the Children's Hospital. And I remember walking out of the Children's Hospital and getting a text message from a friend, and she's like, "I'm pregnant." And I was like, what if I was pregnant right now? And sure enough, I literally was. So it was like 2 weeks later, found out I was pregnant, found out that I got my dream job. Also found out that my husband had a brain tumor. So we had a sheer whirlwind of a year navigating through, brain surgery, seizures, ER visits, ambulance rides, having a brand new baby. I was working, so I'm driving him back and forth to work, like all of these things, and really came to the question of if we're only guaranteed today and we only have one life to live, is this really how we want to be living? Is this really how I want to be going about my days every single day? So it was I wanted more freedom. I wanted more time to be home with my kids. I wanted to be able to do the things I wanted to do. And so I started a business. Like most of the women I know, we want more time. We want more freedom. Let's start a business. And very quickly realized it was taking way more time than it was for me just to go to work at my 9 to 5. And so I, was burning the candle at both ends. I was getting up super early in the morning. I was going to bed really late at night. I was at the time working, every time I was breastfeeding, I was, doing everything any which way I could possibly do it. And I remember getting to the end of year 2, and my mentor at the time was like, "I'm not hitting these goals. Things aren't working. I don't know what else to do." And she was like, "Business is just a numbers game. So if you're not hitting the numbers, you just need to do more." I was like, there is nothing left in me to give more. Mm-hmm. I cannot. I'm literally bleeding at the knuckles. I'm trading the very things I wanted. I wanted to be able to be present when my kids were little. And now instead, I'm working so hard trying to build this business in order to be present. It's counterintuitive. And that's when I kind of stumbled across how men and women are just so different. We are different in the way we experience time and the way that we work. And so I started kind of weaving in some of these things I knew about or was learning about my cycle and about work, and that it wasn't just all these time management hacks and strategies that I'd been trying to implement, and really started to understand like how women are different. And so was using it on the back end of my business, and then started sharing it inside my business, like inside the containers and the communities that I had built at that point in time. And everybody was like, this is such a game changer. Like, this is what more women need to know. And so I completely pivoted everything I was doing and went all in on helping women really learn how women are different. Like, we are not the same as men. We don't work the same. We don't feel and experience life and time and energy and everything the same. And how women, when we understand that, we actually create so much more. So, yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. And
yeah,
I can imagine there's so many people that can relate who are listening, because the people that I have worked with in my own personal journey, often we have hustled, we have burnt out, we are overwhelmed. There's a lot of ADHDers and people with chronic illnesses that are probably listening. And I mean, I say this with so much compassion to anyone listening. How is that hustling working out for you? And the overworking? Because it's not, is it? Like, we need to do something different.
Well, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. I don't want to interrupt you, but it's like fascinating. I actually just read something about this recently, and it was talking about the nervous system and how we overwork, and how sometimes when we're in that hustle mode, we don't even recognize that that's where we're at. Like, we don't, like, it's easy. Maybe if once you've gotten past it and you're like in this place of like, wow, looking back, I was way overworking and I was hustling so hard. But sometimes in that moment, in that season, you don't feel it and you don't recognize it until it's gone too far. So just like putting that caveat out there too is like, I don't know that in that season, I would have necessarily admitted to you that I was hustling. And I don't know that I would have recognized how hard I was working. And I didn't recognize it until I went too far and got myself totally burnt out in the process. So like, just kind of, I don't know how that weaves in the conversation, but it's interesting. I just read that, I think yesterday, about that recognition that sometimes when we're in it, we almost glorify it, right? We're like, I'm committed. I'm passionate about this. Like, I'm dedicated. I'm a type A person. Like, I'm going to do the things that nobody else is willing to do, because that's what most of the marketing and the messaging is telling us to do. Like, it's telling us that, the early bird gets the worm, and the person who sacrifices and is willing to do all these things. Like, our society has very much glorified that hustle and that push. And so in the overworking. And so sometimes in it, we see it as a good thing. We feel like it's doing a good thing when in fact we don't recognize it's not until it totally burns us out.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a great point. And I've said this on the podcast many times before, because exactly what you said. We don't always recognize when we're in it. And I remember myself going to the doctors years ago, and I'm having all these weird symptoms, and they said, "Are you stressed?" And I was like, "No, I'm okay." And I look back, I mean, even just hearing my voice, I look back now and I'm like, I was so fucking stressed.
Yes.
But I was so in it. It's that kind of horrible analogy of like the boiling the frog. You put them in boiling water, they jump out, but you turn the heat up slowly and they stay in there.
Totally. Yeah.
And sometimes we need that step back, or unfortunately we learn the hard way when we hit that burnout that we go, oh shit, something needs to change.
Yeah.
And and it depends, like, where are we on that stage of burnout? Are we recognizing it and we're talking about it and we're getting some of this information and knowledge, or are we like full blown, as in my case, I ended up in a wheelchair for years because I just pushed so hard and got so sick. So for anyone listening that hasn't come across tracking their cycles and what this work is like, how do we fluctuate? How are we different from men? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Totally. So men function predominantly with testosterone, and testosterone is like their main hormone, and it runs on more of a 24-hour schedule. So they tend to start really high in the morning, and then as the day goes on, it kind of waxes and wanes, gets to the end of the day, they go to sleep, they wake up with a fresh dose of testosterone. Women, on the other hand, we function with more of estrogen and progesterone. So and it functions on a 28-day cycle. So at the beginning of the month, we have more estrogen, and at the end of the month, we have more progesterone, and they have this like dynamic dance in how they function. So, we have pretty much 4 kind of distinct phases. We have our menstrual phase at the beginning of the month, where all of our hormones are pretty low and draining and like depleting out. And then as estrogen climbs, we start to feel more energized. We feel more excited. We feel ready. We're like ready to take on those goals and those big projects. And then around the time of ovulation is when estrogen is at its peak. We feel so magnetic. We feel radiant. We feel like we can communicate the best because our body is literally telling the world, like, make a baby with me. I'm ready. Like, I feel really good. I feel really amazing. And then as that estrogen dips off is when progesterone kicks in. And progesterone feels so different than estrogen, like almost complete opposites in some ways. And then in other ways, they're more similar. But it's the time when women start to feel like, I don't want to actually talk to people anymore. Like, please don't bother me. Like, let me be alone. Let me be by myself. Maybe, it's the time when I will go through and clean out my entire downloads folder, or I'll clean out my entire email inbox, or I'm like, I need to clean out the entire refrigerator today. And, it's like, I want to be productive. Sometimes it's very productive, but it's more of this inner production. It's behind the computer or behind myself, like kind of production, instead of where estrogen feels more like I'm going to push stuff out into the world. I'm going to do all these big things and start new big things. This is more of like, let's wrap everything up. Let's close things up. It can also be very emotional. It's the time of the month that a lot of the women that I work with, like they're like, my period's fine. It's this week. It's the week before that PMS week, which is what we in society have kind of like normalized, that it's a PMS week, right? There's a lot of this irritability. And a big part of it, what I've learned is that each of the phases has a superpower. They each have something that they're really meant for us to help us really feel balanced. But this phase really is about us going deep with ourselves and really learning how to understand. And even just to kind of go to piggyback on the conversation we were just kind of having around our nervous systems, is that most of society is not teaching us how to listen to ourselves. Most of society is not teaching us to take a step back and slow down and have this introspection sort of thing. And so what happens in that phase is like an emotion comes up, a feeling comes up, a belief, a fear, something, and we try to squash it down. We try to like keep moving, keep hustling, keep up with the same pace, like keep doing everything the same way we were, and try to just kind of stuff that down. And then what happens is that builds and it builds and it builds and it builds over time. And so this phase is a really great time to like cue you back into like, hey, we actually need to slow down. We actually need to listen. Why are you so irritated that the kids left a sock on the floor? Like, why are you losing your shit? Because there's, somebody didn't take the trash out, or like whatever it might be. It's like asking those deeper questions. So it can actually be, I know a lot of women like hate it. It's not their favorite. Most of my clients, it becomes one of their favorite phases because there's so much power in it. It's just that we have been taught to kind of see it and not use it in the way that we need to. So each of the different phases has, like I said, kind of a superpower, a strength, a need that it meets, like a core need of who we are. Like it helps us create that. And then when we lean into it, we feel so much more balanced. And so it really is that kind of differentiator between like men operating more in this daily rhythm. They have some of the same elements, but it's just in a day rhythm, versus women in more of this monthly rhythm, and really aligning the way that we work and aligning the way we eat and aligning the way we exercise and the way we sleep. And like all of these things with that will help us just feel so much more balanced, like help our nervous system, like help us feel like, hey, this is actually how my body is supposed to function. And it feels so much better.
Yeah. And that point about, we're just not taught to listen to ourselves. No. And this can be because of the patriarchal society that we live in, which, we could talk about all day.
Conversation.
Yes. But like, we are not small men. And, we have so much of this kind of conditioning that we should be able to function the same as men, the same every day. Yeah. And then I'm so glad there are more people out there like you now. And we are openly having these conversations a lot more, because I know for myself, I have not like historically, I didn't know what was going on with my periods. I was often on contraception that kind of masked what was going on. So I didn't actually know where I was in my phase. And then there'd be certain days that I couldn't always pick out a pattern, that I would just feel awful.
Yes.
And I'm like, am I the only one? Like, why am I so sensitive today?
Yeah.
Why can't I just do something?
Yeah.
So having this awareness and this knowledge, you know, I've been working with cycle syncing my business and my life over the last sort of year and a half, and it has been life changing.
Yeah,
it's incredible to actually figure out what the hell's going on with my body, and the times to be kind to ourselves.
Yeah.
So, like, we're recording this podcast now. I am on day 10 of my cycle, I think.
Okay.
So I'm coming up to ovulation.
Yeah.
I don't record my podcast the latter half of the month.
Totally. Yep.
I have certain times that I'm like, yeah, no, because I don't really want to talk to anyone that day. That's when I'll clear up my inbox. Right now, I've got like 50 unread emails in my inbox. Like, no, I will talk to people, not reply to emails.
Exactly. And isn't it, it's just like, I think one, just the awareness, right? Like, even if you weren't actually saying no or like setting those boundaries, even if you just knew like, hey, this is why I don't feel so great today, I think that makes a huge difference for women. And so, like, for any person listening, even if you don't do anything, right? Like, even if you don't change your schedule, if you don't move anything, just like you said, that awareness of, where am I? Like, what is actually happening and why am I maybe feeling this way? When you start doing that, you will be leagues ahead of most of society, because most of society is not doing that, right? Most of society is relying on other people for answers, and they're looking outside of themselves for answers. So just that ability to like, just look at themselves, one, is huge. But like you said, like, it doesn't take much. It doesn't take huge things to shift and like to set those boundaries of like, I'm not going to check my email today, and I'm going to be okay with checking it in a week. I mean, you probably check your email more than that, but like actually sitting down and responding to everything and like getting those things done. Like, I mean, it's a powerful move. It's a very, I just like, it's a liberating, such an empowering thing for women to recognize that they can operate in this way and actually be more productive and get more things done. And it's not lazy, which we hear all the time, especially I think in our modern day society. Men feel really, and maybe not all men, and it's not all men, but there's this like ability, there's the willingness to spout and create negativity around women and how we are different and like wanting equality and all these things. But it's amazing that when women start to recognize we are not little men and they operate with that, it's huge. It's such a powerful thing.
Mm. Yeah. And it takes, I know for myself, like, it takes a journey and confidence and trust as well to, one, figure out what is going on for me, and is there a pattern here, and how am I, and what do I actually need?
Yes.
Because some women in like the PMS phase, the luteal sort of phase, they might just want to eat chocolate and like watch crap on Netflix and just very, very kind of inwards.
Yeah.
And for some of us, it's that like snappy, like, these are my boundaries, and, you know, get out. I don't want to do this. And okay, what is it for me, and what do I need? Is it the snacks? Go prepare the snacks, because that week's going to come around every month.
Yeah.
Or is it, okay, maybe I need to say to my partner that this is where I am right now, and if I'm snappy, I'm sorry, but can I just have a hug? And don't let me get lost in my stuff.
Yeah, I think it's really powerful. Like, I mean, all this conversation is really circling back to like understanding and listening to yourself. But I think a lot of women that have come to me, like, sometimes they don't know that. They don't know what to actually do to help restore themselves, like, and what actually feels good for them. And we've seen it, like countless research and things, that numbing out on social media doesn't oftentimes make us feel good, but we think it will, right? We're like, I just need a break. And I'm the same way. I'm like, I just need a mental break. I need to think about nothing. And so you go to social media and you just start scrolling and you're scrolling. But then you go back to whatever you're doing or whatever part of life, and your tank is not restored, and you're not recharged, and you're not refilled. And so that break, even though it felt like a break, may not have actually been anything that actually helped restore you. And I find this happen a lot of times with women. So they're like, I don't like bubble baths. I don't like laying in, doing nothing, or I don't like whatever. And so there's this challenge of figuring out, like, what is it for you? Like you said, what is it for you that makes your battery recharge, like makes you feel better? And when we look at recharging your battery, it's not just physically, right? We have emotional needs. We have spiritual needs. We have relationship needs. We have creative needs. Like, we have all these different facets to us. And sometimes when we're feeling so depleted, it's because we're not filling the right cup. And so maybe it's looking at, like, during that phase, maybe it is just like, my body physically needs a rest. And so I'm going to allow myself to lay on the couch and watch a movie and just chill out. But maybe it's actually creativity. So what would it look like if maybe you allowed yourself to paint or draw or play music or something of that nature, and like really honing in on what part of me is depleted right now and how do I focus on supporting that? And I think that it keeps unpacking this layer of, really, it is about learning yourself and understanding yourself on a much deeper level.
Yeah. And you touched on like the different types of rest there as well. I don't know if you've come across like the 7 types of rest. And I've got a handout on my website that I will link below. Yeah. Because it's such a good point. Because like for me, for example, right now it's 6:30 p.m. I've been in the office all day. My body's, not as awake as it was maybe
not as perky
earlier in the day. Yeah. But physically, I could move, I could do some stuff. Mentally, I'm like, I'm not quite at where I could be. Yeah. So what do I do to rest in my day? I go for a walk on the beach. That's not a physical break or a physical rest, but it's a mental break. Yeah. And I think for so many of us ADHDers as well, switching our brains off, or at least quietening down some of that noise, can be really difficult. So hence why I go to the beach. And that's my sort of between 10 and 30 minutes of just taking in what's going on. And I don't have a podcast on. I'm not plugged into anything. I'm there in the surroundings, whatever the weather. Yeah. And yes, I'm moving my body. I'm regulating my nervous system. And I'm also having a bit of a break, but not a physical one. I'm having a bit of a mental one.
Totally.
And one thing I have found for myself, for my clients, and you touched on it, is this kind of like counterintuitive. Well, if I do this, then I think, well, I'll get there. If I work harder, if I push more, then I'll be able to feel. So could you talk a little bit more about like how you see that and what we can do about that?
In terms of like the work, like that specifically, like when we kind of have this belief that when we work harder, we're going to get the results, or some other piece of that. Yeah, I think, what I've seen is that going kind of to that same idea is like kind of goes into the patriarchal type of model. I think our world is very focused on this results-based sort of drive and outcome-based drive. And there's a lot of focus on consistency. There's a lot of focus on habits. There's a lot of focus on this drive, right? And like we see a lot of really successful business owners. Even just yesterday, I hated it. It was so awful. But I saw an interview from Mark Zuckerberg talking about how we need more masculinity back in business, that in the last few years or so that I think he used the word neutered corporate America. Whole other conversation. But this idea that we need more masculinity in corporate America kind of has this layer, this essence that it's about working hard. It's about consistency. It's about pushing. It's about drive. It's about sacrificing all these things. I think that mentality has been just so ingrained in the way of the world that when we are in this place of wanting a little bit more intuition, we want a little bit more creativity, we want a little bit more flow, we want a little bit more balance in our lives, we feel like that's wrong because we've been taught that this other way is the way to do it. Even if we look at, getting good grades at school or for kids, like working really hard at school and then having all of these sports and doing music and doing all these other things, like we're teaching our kids that they have to be hustling and working and filling in every crack of their day in order to be successful. Mm-hmm. And so I think it really does it's such a deep layer of looking at where our world is and how it's just permeates literally everything. And so I think it's really beautiful when we start to look at like the cycle and how the cycle does have these elements of rest. It does have these elements of reflection. It has these times of introflexion and introception and like all these things. Like it's helping us kind of get back to what we really were to do, to how we were supposed to be. And when we look at it on a much even deeper level, we look at this idea of pushing and hustling and going really hard. It's like, the focus is on production, right? It's on the results. It's on the outcome. It's on what we're going to get from it. And I know you in the UK, I don't know if it's the same over there as it is here in the United States, but we're seeing a huge reduction in the nutrient level of our soils that we can't, like the apple that I can buy at the grocery store today has far less nutrition in it than it did even 20 years ago, because the soils are so depleted. There's nothing left in them to actually grow nutritious foods for us. And part of that comes from overworking and overusing the same soils over and over and over again and not replenishing the earth. And so when we look at this idea of like work and overworking and hustling and stuff, it's like we as humans have been doing this to Mother Nature, right? We're wanting Mother Nature to continue to produce and to continue to produce all the time. And Mother Nature is like, I can't do this anymore. F you humans. Like it's not going to work, right? And so this whole concept of rest and support and taking care of it and nourishment and healing is such a biological law of the universe. And when we fight against it is when we end up burning out. We end up with nutrient depleted soils. We end up with climate change. We end up with all these things because the way of the world was not meant to produce and be in this hustle mode all the time.
And that's such a good point on just how connected we are. And I remember reading this. I don't know if it was one of Gabor Mate's books. It's one of the trauma books I've read over the last few years. And they say in the body, anything that is consistently growing is called cancer. And yet our society is needing to have constant growth. And we are quite literally living in like a cancerous society. Yeah. Because the only goal is to grow. Yeah. Yet in the body, that would kill us. And we can look at how all these things are linked. There's a fantastic documentary that I would imagine you've probably seen. I can't remember the name of it. that is about the soil and the nutritional quality of the soil. And I know it's based in the US. But we're not far off. I think you guys use more crap on your soils.
Oh yes. Don't even get me started on that.
Yes. But you have better organic food. So because of that, I would imagine.
I mean, they say these days that buying organic doesn't really even do anything, but who knows? But that's that's out of my expertise. But but I was going to say, it just goes to that conversation of topic of like what we do and how we interact with the world does make a difference, and like how we show up and what we eat, right? Like even talking about that, like organic food versus non-organic food versus toxins and pesticides, and like all of those things are going to impact the way our body functions. So bringing it back to the menstrual cycle, what we're putting on our skin, what we're eating has a direct impact on our hormone balance and our hormone levels. And so if you have irregular cycles or hard cycles or painful periods or, any of these types of experiences with our cycle, one, it's been normalized that this is just the normal way that women should exist, which is false. But part of it is like our habits and the things that we're doing to our body have a direct impact on how that hormone function runs. And so, bringing it kind of back to your nervous system's idea and stuff too, is like a woman's body needs safety in order for the hormones to function at their peak or at their optimum. So if your nervous system is fried and you're out of balance, if you're high less stress levels, if you're engaged in all this hustle and this work and things like that, the nervous system will protect. Like it doesn't want to bring a baby into the world if it feels like it's going to be eaten by a lion, right? And so when our nervous system is in that, like, I'm going to be eaten by a lion phase state, it's not going to help the normal biological functions of fertility. That fertility system is going to shut down because it's like, I'm not bringing a baby into the world. It's not safe. And so when we even just look at the mechanics of the body, a woman's body really needs safety, and that nervous system really needs the balance in order for everything else to function. So it's looking at, one, listening to the body and how the body is impacting the way you show up and the way you interact with your world. And then also how the world is directly impacting the way your hormones show up, and how that it's this like very dynamic dance between the two.
Yeah. And this can seem quite overwhelming to some people because there can be so much. Like I remember listening to a podcast, Diary of the CEO, recently, and I'm saying I can't remember a lot today. Obviously having one of those days. I can't remember who you spoke to, but
I can't remember a lot of times, so you're good.
Yeah. I remember the interesting part of it, not the person they spoke to. They spoke to someone who talked about just how much our environment is impacting us hormonally, and just how toxic so much stuff is.
Totally.
But they said, like, start small with things. And one of the takeaways from that was how much food are we having in plastic? And especially we're heating food in plastic. So I will always put food in glass containers now because it disrupts our hormone cycles.
Yep.
And also parfum. If you ever look on the back of anything that's like scented, which is a lot of stuff, if it has parfum and it doesn't say that it's from a natural source, often it will have something in there that can disrupt us. And it's those little things that we might kind of take out or add in that we don't necessarily see until it's that cumulative collection of something. And then I see a lot of clients who are struggling with chronic illnesses and odd symptoms, and they're like, is it mold? Is it an allergy? Is it chronic fatigue? Is it like, where's this come from? I don't understand. And often it's not, often, pretty much always, it is never just one thing. It's a collection of a lot of stuff, and our body's just like, nah, just can't do it anymore. There's only so much kind of pushing and fighting and surviving that it can do before our body's just like, I'm done.
Even so just like the accumulation of that effect over time, right? Like if you are like, for me personally, I'm allergic to all fragrances and all perfumes and things like that. But it wasn't something that was an accumulative effect. It wasn't until, 4 years ago that I started having like full allergic reactions to things. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And it took a long time to figure out what it was. But that was one of the things. And I'm like, but I've tolerated this. This has been in my products my entire life. Why for 30 something years it's been fine and now it's not? And I think some of it is the cumulative effect of all of those things that we do over time that build up. Yeah. And I've known the same because I have anaphylactic allergies, and there have been certain things that we've kind of looked back at my life and been like, well, I'm sure I'd have had that before. Why now? Yeah. Like I went into anaphylactic shock in September last year, probably from egg white. I'm vegan anyway, so I shouldn't have had it. It was in a cocktail, but it was one of those like, I'm sure I've had this, so what's going on? And I can go to the doctors and they'll look for something very specific, but not always take into account, well, what's going on? Was that a stressful time in my life? What else is going on in my system and body at the time? Totally.
So the point I was getting to with this podcast I listened to, this is my brain going off on random tangents, was listening to that. It felt like there was just so much, and oh my God, I need to change everything in my life. And often our nervous system will then just go, Nope, it's too much. I'll just ignore it all. So same with tracking our cycles. What are some simple, easy to implement ways to actually start working with ourselves to, I know you said about being more magnetic and building our business. How? What are some simple ways to do that?
Yeah. I think, well, one of the things I tell all of my clients is every day, just ask yourself, like, what do I need today? Regardless of where you are in your cycle, just that habit of being able to check in and tune in with yourself. It doesn't take long. It takes, you could do it less than a minute. You could do it in the morning when you're getting ready. You could do it, when you're drinking your coffee or your tea or whatever. It doesn't have to be long, but just that intentionality of pausing for a micro moment and saying like, what do I need today? I think is a powerful first step. The other thing is just starting to track your cycle. A lot of women don't track their cycle at all. And then those that do are oftentimes just tracking when their period starts. But as we talked about today, your cycle is so much more than just your period. Your period's actually just the encore. It's the final production of everything that's been happening. So if you really want to be track well, I always recommend trying to track ovulation, because ovulation is really more the queen and the production or the director of the whole cycle. And so when she's occurring is going to determine the whole rest of it. So understanding what's happening with ovulation can be incredibly powerful. Oftentimes that might look like a variety of different ways that you can track that and learn. And we can get into that maybe you can come over to my website, send me a message, and I've got a training on all the ways you can track your ovulation. But ovulation is probably the biggest one. But even beyond that, if you didn't want to track ovulation and you're just I just want to track my cycle, it's just having a little log of what's my energy level like today? What am I craving? You mentioned chocolate. A lot of women do actually crave more carbohydrates and more chocolate-based items and things like that in that last half of the month. And it's not because you're just having all these weird cravings. It's because either A, your body needs some sort of nutrition, right? Magnesium's a huge one. We oftentimes are craving foods that have magnesium, or your body actually does need more carbohydrates. It needs things. And so having that understanding of what is my energy level? Do I want to show up on social media? Do I want to record a podcast today? How do I actually feel? And starting to track that and just put it out. I've had clients come back and they're like, this exact same feeling, this exact same thing happened to me every day or every month on this one day. This one day was exactly the same. And the only way you're going to know that is if you start actually paying attention and listening to it. So it's kind of asking yourself, what do I need today? Where am I? What am I feeling? And then just writing that down. And that's honestly, even just that will make such a huge difference for people. Yeah.
Amazing. So there's some really, really good ways to start tracking your cycle. And for those that might already have some awareness of cycle tracking and might have been doing it for a while, how can they then start to maybe align their business to work with them? And what could that do for them?
Yeah. So one, I would highly recommend that your cycle's on your calendar. I use Google. And so my cycle has its own Google calendar and it repeats and it's in there every month and whatnot. So every time I look at an appointment, every time I look at an event, every time I look at anything on my calendar, I always have the cycle there front and foremost. So, like you said earlier, I'm not going to schedule podcasts in that luteal phase if I'm not sometimes I will, but I know it and I won't schedule anything else around there so that I make sure I give myself rest and time to recoup and things like that. But really, I'm looking at where can I schedule things that are in that more magnetic phase, right? Me recording a podcast when I'm ovulating, people are going to feel it. I'm going to want to be on the call. I'm going to want to talk. I'm going to want to share. I'm going to probably come up with new metaphors and new ideas and share things in different ways than when you're kind of in that more introspective, I just want to be by myself type of energy. It's very different. And so the energetics of our bodies, right? We know in the science, everything has energy and everything has a frequency. the energy, I actually, now that I think about this, I say this, like, I would love to see a study around like the energetic frequency of women as they change throughout the month. I think that would be incredibly fascinating. My theory would be that energetically, you're vibrating at a very different level in those different phases. And so in that phase, when you're magnetic and radiant and confident and whatever, you're connecting with other people in that way, in a much higher frequency, and people are going to feel it. They're going to connect with it, and they're going to be magnetized to it. They want to be around it, right? Like, we're drawn to those things that make us feel really good. And so it's just really about taking a look at everything that you're doing in your business, all of the little tasks, and kind of matching them up with where the energy of those tasks are. So it's kind of like this, the whole process of like figuring out where things are and where things go. But even if you're just changing like a little bit, like you're like, hey, I'm going to schedule this week. On Monday is going to be my like CEO time. And on Monday this week, I'm going to focus on getting a lot of emails done. I'm going to write a bunch of emails, all that. The next CEO week, you're like, I'm going to focus on my vision. I'm going to focus on my plans, my goals. Like, what do we need to do? The next week is like getting that, maybe a webinar ready. And then the next week is recording a bunch of social media or whatever it might be. It's like really taking the idea of like, have this block on my calendar that I do the same things every week, and more of like, here's the block, but every week what I'm doing in that block is different based on the energy of where my cycle's at. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. And I know I came to some of this kind of learning the hard way, as in I was doing things and feeling a lot of that like should energy and like, oh, I don't want to post on social media today. Yeah. I'm just not feeling it. And that's the energy that goes out. Yes. And like, what are you drawing in? You're just getting more of that back.
Yeah.
And I love recording a podcast, and I know I'm good at chatting, and I love doing this. And I was noticing there are certain days where I had things scheduled in and I was like, I don't want to talk to anyone today.
Yeah.
And I started realizing, okay, where am I in my cycle? Why am I making this hard for myself? Why am I having to psych myself up to do something I really enjoy? Do it when I enjoy it. But I love that you said just put it in your calendar, because I have it on an app on my phone, but not actually in my calendar.
Yeah.
And my VA's in my calendar. And she's like, yeah, Jeni, I know a lot about your life, but I don't know what's going on with your cycle. So
yeah,
you record things when you feel like you want to record them, and you go on podcasts when you want to. You're in the energy.
Well, even like that. So like on that calendar, it has like the certain weeks are blocked as busy versus other weeks are open. So like my automated calendar scheduling stuff. So like if a client or a podcast interview or anything, if they try to schedule on my calendar, it won't even show those weeks as available. Like it blocks them completely out. And to your point, my VA, she'll come to me and she'll like, hey, the only time Jeni has, I don't know if this has happened with you or not, but like she'll come to me and say like, the only time for this podcast falls in your luteal phase. Do you want me to book it, or do you want me to hold off and see what else we can come up with? So she knows, like she sees it. She's aware of it. She's very much like, I know sometimes we will, but I'm going to default to you. Versus if it fell in one of those other phases, she would have just automatically scheduled it. No questions, So it does make a difference.
Yeah, a huge difference. And like I've got a launch coming up next week, which by the time this episode comes out will be long in the past. But I've put that launch in. I'm doing a free workshop, and that is being scheduled specifically around my ovulation time for a good reason.
Yes.
So I'm not in that place of, oh, I don't feel good enough, and what if people see me? And that's when I've occasionally feel like that. That's my like rest time. That's looking after me time, not putting myself out there, because again, that goes out. So one very quick question, because I'm aware of the time. Yeah. For anyone that has irregular cycles or is on contraception or is maybe menopausal, postmenopausal, how can they still do this?
Yeah. Great question. It kind of is a little bit different for each one of those different situations, but really the core of it is that we are all still cyclical, right? Well, even men are cyclical. It's just a matter of like what that cycle really looks like for you and how we really lean into that cycle. The way the hormones function is going to be different. Irregular cycles, there could be a lot of things we could do to help support getting that cycle one more regular. It goes back to that conversation around like, what are we doing to our cycles? Like, what are we doing to our bodies that maybe aren't allowing it to operate very optimally? And can we provide some structure and supports to the body that'll help that get more regular? So that's one. But birth control, pregnancy, menopausal, perimenopausal, like all of that, like the hormones are very different. Like it's not the normal same cycle. But when we start to look at the cycles and the cyclical nature of like who we are and how we are as humans, the sun operates very rhythmically with the way men operate. And then the moon operates more on that same cycle as women do. And so what I find for a lot of women that are in kind of more of that variability or things are a little bit off is that if they start to sync up themselves and like align the way that they work and the way that they're functioning and like living and all those types of things with more of the moon cycle, that they start to create that rhythm that their body starts to feel. So it's more about like helping the body get back into a rhythm of that nature. And they tend to find that that makes such a huge difference. So it definitely is different in that way. And it could be a whole podcast interview of its own on talking about that. But really like the short answer would be start using the moon, start aligning the way you work and the way you live and the way you're doing all your things with the moon cycle, and watch your body start to say like, okay, this is how we do this. Like, this is that rhythm that we used to use, or that we did at some point in our lives, and this feels so much better.
Yeah. And I have spoken about the links between the seasons, the moon and our menstrual cycles in a previous episode. So I will find that out and pop it in the show notes as well. So for anyone that is listening and wants to hear more about you and find out more of how they can do this for themselves, where can they find you?
Yeah. I love hanging out on Instagram. So it's just Renae Fieck over there on Instagram. My website's the same, reneefieck.com. I do have a free like cycle tracker and downloads and things like that over there. For people that are in the United States, I am running a little bit of a promotion where you can get a copy of my book for free. All you have to do is just pay shipping and handling. So if you go to reneefieck.com /
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, free book, and you can get a copy of the free book. Hopefully at some point we can get it international, but man, those international shipping charges are just outrageous. So for now, it's for US based people. They can get a copy of the book. Otherwise, if you're outside of the US, you can find the book on Amazon or other websites and things like that. But those are great places to start for sure.
Okay, amazing. Yeah. And I assume your book is about syncing your cycle?
Yep, it's called Cycle Sync Your Business. Mm-hmm.
Okay, amazing. Cool. Well, yeah, there are a lot of listeners from the US and, well, from all over the world. So, thank you for sharing those. And thank you so much for coming on and doing this work and bringing this conversation to more of us, because this is so empowering. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Calm Your Nervous System. I hope you found the conversation as interesting as I did. If you would like to start healing your nervous system, I have a free energy diary available just for podcast listeners, which will really help you see your blind spots about how you're spending your time and your energy. Find it at jennyadamscoach.co.uk/podcast. Find out more about me and somatic coaching in the show notes below. See you next time.